Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagel, and welcome back to another fun-filled, action-packed of Iowa's most data-driven conservative podcast. We are here in studio today, just Chris Ingstad and myself, for a relatively special edition of the ITR Live podcast. As we have teased out on several previous episodes, we have poll results.
We do have poll results. And let's make it clear, it's special because of those poll results. It's not special because John is gone. John has not made it back from Easter yet. I don't know if it was snow or he just found the right Easter treats he liked. But either way, It's just the two of us and our poll results today, Chris.
Yeah, and if for those that know me personally, like there are a few things that get me as excited about poll result as my poll results do. It's a holiday all unto itself, and so we are going to spend the next 40 or 50 minutes going deep into crosstabs. And no, we are actually.
Well, we probably will. We're just gonna stop recording much sooner than that.
Yeah, that's right. So, but a couple of goals I think that I'd like, and it's easy to talk about a lot of numbers, and it's easy to get lost in a lot of data, even as something as thrilling as political polling data. But we want to just give you a sense of what the ITR Foundation Poll is, why we do it, who we do it with, what's, some of the goals and the quality of the polling. So we want to talk about that for a little bit.
Let's also tell them where they can see the poll and the results.
Well, we're going to do that too. That's okay. Right. And then just give a flavor of what you'll find in those. Now, data like this is much easier to digest and consume if you look at it on paper or go to the website, whether you're at itrfoundation.org and taxrelief.org will have a little extra insight on the poll. Maybe it's
going to have what you want to say about it, isn't it, Chris?
The ITR Foundation side of it's going to be pretty straightforward, and then if you want me to kind of fire away or give you a little extra flavor or sauce on the results, you can go there. So the ITR Foundation Poll is, I believe this is now the 6th iteration of the poll. We started this in 2021.
Yep, it took you about 12 full months here before we relented and let you do this, let you talk me into doing regular polling. But yes, we have done this similar style with the same outstanding polling firm since October of 21.
Yeah. And so one of the benefits of that, there's a huge benefit to using Signal, who was recently rated the top private pollster by 538.com in the 2022 election cycle. So that's a big deal. 538, even though they lean to the left, is seen as pretty much an authority on polling, and to get that kind of recognition is a big deal. So we have a lot of confidence in our data. We don't try and cook the numbers at all. We go to them and say, hey, give us a look at what's going on. And I think, Chris, you could probably testify that I put a lot of work into what those questions look like, so that they're not leading questions. They're not written in a way to try and generate the answer that we want to have, which you'll see with a lot of
we can come up with the own answer we want to have for ourselves. That's not a problem.
I could give you an income tax answer that looked really good if you answer the question the right way.
Yeah, the idea of this is to really take the pulse on Iowans, see what they think is important, and ultimately, Chris, even when we ask questions that maybe aren't policy specific, I think those answers still paint a picture of what Iowans want and what is resonating with them. And we talked about this earlier. Maybe we'll talk about it here in the podcast, but you can start connecting some of the dots between how they view certain things and how they feel about certain pieces of policy.
That's right. So the last bit about sort of the poll itself that I want to mention is, we're going to spike the football here real quick before we move any further. We did this after the election in November, but the ITR Foundation poll was spot on. Mm-hmm. We nailed it in the 2022 election. Now, they're all snapshots in time. There's margins of error. I'm not necessarily saying that we're the best, although I'm saying that we got it right.
If you want to say we are out there in cyberspace land, we're not going to argue with you.
Right. So, just as a reminder of all of the public polling that was released in Iowa leading up to last fall's election, ours was the best. Governor Reynolds won by 19 points. It was nearly identical to what we had in our final ITR Foundation poll. And we didn't just get it right at the very end. We had been there all along.
Well, that's the
version after version.
That's the key. And the other two races that I'd say we were right all along, where other pollsters kind of wavered a little bit, was the Attorney General race that Brenna Byrd won, and frankly the Senate race that Chuck Grassley won quite comfortably. We never really saw that race as in play from our polling results, but other pollsters did.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned the AG's poll the AG race between Brenna Byrd and Tom Miller. We were the first ones to poll that, and we had General Byrd up 4.5 points in our initial poll in February. And then it moved back and forth. Had her up almost 5, down fractionally, up 3, down by a couple points. And then our final poll, we had her up winning by almost a full point, which is pretty close to what the final result was. We didn't have a poll 3 weeks out that showed her down 20 or whatever it was. So I say all of that because anybody can put numbers on a piece of paper and throw it out as a poll. Anybody can field a survey. You can go on any number of cheap websites and figure it out. This is a serious scientific endeavor that has yielded meaningful results in the past. So what did we find? I think
we found Iowans don't like taxes.
Yes, we did.
Both they don't like property taxes, and they sure don't want their income taxes to go up.
Right. So we ask both the sort of horse race politics, favorable, unfavorable, who would you vote for kinds of questions. We also ask questions on issues, and there's some really interesting things in here. And part of the thing that people want to look at is what's changed from the election to now, right? Otherwise, that's why we did it. But one of the things that you saw that you mentioned just there, Chris, is that more and more Iowans are responding that their most important issue is issues around their family budget or their personal financial security,
the impact government will have on those items.
So we ask people to respond, what's your most important issue, and give them a series of options. Almost a quarter of all Iowans are responding that it's inflation and the cost of living, coupled with, and this is one that's really growing now, taxes and government spending. That has grown to be the second most important issue, is the issue of taxes and government spending. Now, it should not be lost on anyone that this poll was in the field as Iowans were getting their property tax assessments in the mail. Right. So I'm guessing, yes, they're a little bit sensitive to that. But that's over 40% of Iowans.
Those were the top two issues.
Those are the top two issues, but it is financial concerns of Iowans.
Well, Chris, we have been under this environment of really high inflation for a while now. And you can only shift things around in your budget so long before there's just nowhere else to move dollars around. And I think that as you consider your property tax bill and that potentially takes a big jump, people are fed up, right? Yeah. They've got nowhere else to go on this. And so the decisions that government is making those decisions are really hitting home at this point.
Yes. And so I'm not going to spoil the whole poll, but there are two other issue questions that I wanted to highlight because they deal directly with issues in front of the legislature right now. Yeah. So one of them is, and the question is, local governments in Iowa have broad authority to set property tax rates and budget levels as they deem appropriate. In order to control the growth of property taxes, do you support or oppose the General Assembly setting limits on how much a local government can tax and spend? So this idea, is it appropriate for the state legislature to come in and tell a local government you can't tax and spend that much? Because the criticism is, well, that's local control. Let them do whatever they want. And you'll hear all these mayors and city councils and administrators and all the tax eaters lining up to say it's all about local control. So we asked that question of Iowans. What did they think? So let's go beyond the local government officials and ask Iowans.
I suppose the fact that the way government is structured in Iowa, the state is the authority.
Yes.
But okay,
right.
So
never mind that the state actually does get to decide, right? So
okay, push that aside.
Okay, and I got to go on my rant. local control is never asserted unless local government is trying to raise your taxes or take away your freedoms.
Right.
It's never asserted in a way to maximize the individual.
Right.
Okay. So what do Iowans think? 2/3 of Iowans support limits on local government, increased limits set by the legislature. Only 17% of Iowans oppose the legislature reining in local government.
It should be obvious when you hear those numbers, and we said we weren't going to go into too much breakdown.
That's important, though. Yeah, but we're going into that one.
But on this one, that was instituting some controls on the growth of local government, right? That was a majority position for Republicans and independents, but it also took a plurality of Democrats, right? More Democrats were in favor of control as opposed to not implementing it.
And we have talked about this. These issues cut across party boundaries. Is you don't need to have an R or a D after your name to instinctively understand that you are being taxed far too much on your property taxes.
Right.
So, yes. Okay. Another interesting one was, and it's the first time we've tested this one, was the prospect of a constitutional amendment requiring a 2/3 majority in the legislature to increase the income tax.
Right.
Okay. Similarly, 61% of Iowans support that prospect, 18% oppose.
So, and the same holds true. Majority support between Republicans and independents, and a plurality among Democrats. So again, and Chris, these are not necessarily partisan issues or ideological issues. If you think they are, I'd say shame on you. They're really kitchen table issues.
Right.
How is this impacting my family or my business?
And it's tied together because it goes back to that idea that Iowans' top issues are those things that they talk about when they're talking about their family budget, because it's strained right now.
Yes.
In Biden's economy, with soaring inflation and all these challenges that we have, people are getting concerned about what that bottom line number is for them. So I think those are really encouraging numbers. I mean, we saw the last constitutional amendment, which had a lot of interest on it, was the right to keep and bear arms amendment last fall, which had
our polling on that was fairly accurate too. It was
fairly accurate, and it was nowhere near this optimistic. This is a far more shows a far higher level of support, and that spread between support and oppose, than even the right to keep and bear arms amendment. This is a very popular piece of policy to put in the Iowa Constitution. So, good. Well, that's kind of a little preview of some of our issue polling.
Chris, there are some other interesting questions in there.
Well, we can go through them if you want.
Well, we don't need to. Maybe at least let folks know.
We still need people to go to itrfoundation.org or taxrelief.org. There's your shameless plug if they want to get all the info. Look, I will say this, and I want the folks listening to go there and check this stuff out. But I'm going to circle back as we pivot into the horse race stuff with one other thing, is to look at these partisan spreads, and it's not, you're not going to find it on the top line survey, but is that the difference in how Republicans versus Democrats view an issue, and that the tax issues, like we just talked about, those break across party lines, but others don't in the same way, and it's interesting to see which is which. But we asked kind of the tried and true polling question of, do you think things in the United States are heading in the right direction or off on the wrong track? But we also asked that of Iowa. Do you think things in Iowa are heading in the right direction or off on the wrong track? That's interesting. 75% of 3 out of 4 Iowans believe that the United States is off on the wrong track. And I think that's plainly obvious. Just anybody that's got their head screwed on straight. Generally speaking, would you say things in Iowa are headed in the right direction or off on the wrong track? That's about a 50-50 prospect. Slightly more people think we're heading in the right direction, but there are very heavy partisan splits to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
yes.
But so but So
I mean, Chris, everything else equal, don't most of these issues sort of default to just the partisan position?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting though that you look at what the no party voters are doing, which is really where the folks that do this for a living that are running campaigns, they're going to go look at those are the swing voters, but no party voters believe just like the top line number, 73% of them think the country's off in the wrong direction, which I think is an ominous number for President Biden heading into a reelection. But it's about a 50-50 to think about Iowa. And look, those sometimes that's the economy is a challenge at the national level. Well, there's some challenges to it in Iowa as well. And that doesn't necessarily reflect on Iowa policymakers. So I found that interesting. We've got results.
Look, Chris, when it breaks on sort of party lines and it's just sort of a toss-up, I usually just shrug my shoulders and go, well, we're all virtue signaling there. When numbers really seem to go transcend the partisan lines, that's when I go, I think we're onto something here.
Well, one way where they don't cross party lines as much as I would think they would is the favorable, unfavorable on President Biden, which is 32% of Iowans still have a favorable opinion of the job or a favorable opinion of Joe Biden as president.
Okay.
65% of Iowans have an unfavorable. It's 2-1. And Republicans and no party voters have a very similar opinion of President Biden. The only folks that really are still hanging in there for the president are base Democrats, which shouldn't surprise you. I'm not going to spoil. We've got results on favorable ratings for former President Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Governor Kim Reynolds. So you're going to have to go check that out.
Chris,
on your own.
It'd be interesting to know how Iowans view a matchup of some of those potential presidential candidates.
I'm glad you asked, Chris, because we asked the question, and we have before. We're the only ones, I think, doing this, or we were the first ones there. If you had a rematch in 2024 between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, what's the result on that? But I also wanted to see this in a little different light. So we also asked it, what if that was Joe Biden against Ron DeSantis? What's that look like? Heads up in the 2024 presidential election. So that's in there as well. And then also, and I'm not going to spoil it, but you got to go check it out. But we actually have a way too early look at the 2024 Republican field for president.
Is this where we can insert our verbal asterisk, though, on those results?
Yeah. It is an admittedly small sample size.
It's a small sample size for the Republican field, because only the folks who are planning to participate in the Republican caucuses answered that one.
Our poll is 600 Iowans that we screen based on where they live, Republican, Democrat, age, all those different variables to get a cross-section of Iowans. It doesn't really matter what a base Democrat thinks about the Republican presidential field because they're not going to be participating in it. Right. So we screen that, and it's not even just Republicans. We filter that down to the people that are going to actually show up and vote. So 162 of those 600 and
weighed in on who they would prefer in the Republican in the Iowa caucuses.
So we've got that list there as well. But anyway, but I do want folks to check that out. We're going to have plenty of information on the website. The full release will be there. Our social media is going to have some graphics, and you'll see it in our newsletter. So if you are one of our listeners that's not getting that, or you're not following us on social media, you need to be doing that, which you should be doing anyway. But if the poll is what gets you there, then so be it. So
right. And if you found this podcast, you can find us on the internet.
That's a great point. With the possible exception of my dad, somehow we've got him subscribed where he gets an alert on his phone and listens. But to ask him to check an email or anything else, that's a bridge too far. So sorry, Dad, I had to do that to you. But anyway, maybe not everyone, but if you really. I'll say this. If you really do want that information and you can't find it, get a hold of us. And Terry, who we tried to drag in on the podcast today, wouldn't do it, who handles our member relations, she'd be happy to help you out and get you some information. So anyway, with that all having been said, anything else you want to share about the poll today?
No, I think it's really interesting. I think our listeners will find the results interesting too.
Good. Well, I do too, and it's a project that we're proud of, and it's a project that we're happy to do to add to the kind of the public conversation about where is sentiment in Iowa among Iowans. And we think it's important. And I think it informs the conversation, especially as we approach the end of the legislative session, and some information that hopefully can help policymakers as they move forward on some of these issues. So with that all having been said, thanks again for joining us. And don't forget to like and subscribe, tell your friends. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.